Now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And please do sign up for our weekly newsletter where you can be kept informed of all of the upcoming guests we have on the show. Woo-hoo! You can also access our over 5 years of archives all for free and at no cost to you. So I wanted to make an announcement, and I'll have there's a number of exciting events that are coming up, mostly in the fall, but I thought I would start talking about them now so that you can collect your pennies, especially for this event. It's happening in October, and I actually have the date now. It's October 18th through 21st in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's the Paradigm Symposium. But speakers that they have, okay, check out this list. And if you watch, History Channel, you're going to be like, excuse me? Okay, here's the lineup. Eric Von Donigan, George Norrie, Giorgio Tsoukalos, the guy with the hair, Bill Burns, Philip Coppens, Ian Pundin, Lars Grant and Marie Jones, Larry Flaxman, Nick Redfern, David Weatherly, Anthony Sanchez, John Venture, and Dan Madsen, and more, including Scotty Roberts and Micah Hanks. I will be there all weekend, hanging out, doing readings, and hanging out, being crazy. Oh, my God, I am just so excited. Anyway, that's October 18th. I lose the page. 18th through 21st, Minneapolis, Minnesota. The webpage is paradigmsymposium.com. So let me tell you about my next guest, Lynn Woodland, and she has a new book called Making Miracles. Lynn Woodland is an international teacher and human potential expert who has worked at the experimental edges of the body-mind-spirit, transpersonal psychology, and the New Thought movement since 1972. Her particular expertise is in what gives rise to miracles and in teaching ordinary people to live extraordinary lives so that miracles become not just possible, but natural. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio the author of Making Miracles, Create New Realities for Your Life and Our World, Lynn Woodland. Hi, Lynn. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to be here.
Thanks for coming on the show and helping us learn how we can make miracles not just possible, but natural. I love that part, but natural. Because so many people think it's something that's just relegated to the Bible and not something that we can have in our daily lives.
No, miracles, so many people out there, I'm sure, are familiar with A Course in Miracles, who says that something has gone wrong when miracles don't happen.
Have you read that whole book?
I pretty much have. I
give you credit.
I read it from start to finish, but many, many years ago, in the early 80s, I became very interested in the work of Jerry Jampolsky, who founded the Center for Attitudinal Healing movement. And that's actually how I got excited about miracles. He started with this group of kids, many of whom had cancer and really terrible prognoses, weren't expected to live, and started teaching them these very simple principles that he drew from A Course in Miracles. Just having them come into a room with caregivers, everybody was put on an equal playing field. In other words, there were no caregivers and participants. Everybody was just on the same level and just living in the moment and practicing unconditional love and letting go of fear. And he saw these incredible miracles happen with these kids, that the kids who weren't expected to live went into remission and healings were happening. And I got very excited about that work and actually got a group together to start a Center for Attitudinal Healing where I lived at the time in Baltimore. And we saw the same things happen, that people who were very sick started having spontaneous healings, and even the able-bodied volunteers started seeing amazing things happening in their own lives as they just started practicing these very simple principles that are essentially about just being present in the moment in love. That's pretty much all it is. And that just set me on a course from mid-'80s on of just exploring what gives rise to miraculous experience and how can we all learn how to do this in our lives and to live miraculous lives.
And I want to talk about the health piece first, since you brought that up, because I'm a firm believer. I work as a medical intuitive and do a lot of energy medicine with my clients, and I'm a firm believer that, our thoughts and emotions are what create the disease in the first place, and if you can work to clear the limiting thought or the negative belief or whatever it is keeping you in that bad energy, in that bad mojo, then you can expect or experience miracles in your healing because it'll go away. There's nothing keeping you stuck. Are you talking about kind of the same thing, the same process here?
Absolutely, it includes that process. I know in my own work with healing and healers over the years, I've found that the first thing I want to help people do is shift their focus away from the illness, because people get so stuck in this dynamic of battling the disease that I think it almost keeps them stuck in it. And I've found that as people can begin to identify, I believe that every condition, be it an illness or some other circumstance in our lives that we can't stand, we just love to hate it, we battle with it. It's serving some function. It's not that we want it or that we're choosing it in any kind of conscious way. It's that we're getting something from it. It's teaching us something. It's helping us to meet a need that we haven't figured out any other way to meet. And as we're able to identify what some of those hidden purposes to a stuck condition or an illness might be, it gives us a lot more freedom to shift. For example, I've known many people dealing with very serious illnesses who, at the onset of their illness, had their very first life experience of putting themselves first, of being the center of other people's caring attention, of not having to be perfect, of having permission to stop things they were doing that weren't really nourishing their soul, their spirit. And, these are big perks. And unless we're willing to do some of that shifting without having some external condition force us to it, I think of it as an inner, unconscious, and sometimes wiser part of ourselves will keep the circumstance in place because we need some of those secondary gains more than we need to let go of the disease.
So when we're talking about situations that are not physical health related, so let's say we find ourselves in relationships where we are ultimately betrayed. Are we talking about looking at why we keep having these same patterns happening over and over and then making it so that they're not happening to us anymore?
Well, certainly, yes. I think as we look at some of those patterns, we can look at them in a couple of ways. One is that we can look at those repeating patterns as a mirror reflection of something we've learned to believe about life, something that we learned probably at a very early age from how we were treated as a child and how we watched the adults in our lives treat one another. And if we can start to see some of those patterns where we may feel victimized as being less about what the world is doing to us and more about what we are expecting the world to do to us, we can start to make a shift. there's also another layer that we can look at of, well, how might this repeating pattern be serving me in some way? And that's often a very difficult layer to uproot, because especially a painful pattern, our first thought is, well, there's nothing about this that is serving me. Not a thing. I'm not insane. And yet, there might be something very scary about stepping out into a realm of intimacy, of relationships really functioning and working, where we have to go deeper and show more of ourselves. And that might bring up a whole new realm of fear that we've never had to explore around, well, what will happen if people really know who I am? Or that might lend itself to a bigger hurt. Sometimes the pain that's familiar to us becomes a weird sort of comfort zone in an unconscious way. And we hold it in place because the unknown places have, these terrors, these unknown mysterious terrors that on some level feel even more dire.
And can you give a more, and I'm going to say specific example, maybe something that you've experienced in your life or have seen someone do? So, I mean, I understand what you're saying on a real mental level. Okay.
Yeah, I got a good one. And this is from my life. This was a couple of decades ago, actually, when I was first starting, even more than that, starting to work with some of the spiritual principles of prosperity. And I did a lot of the work, and those principles work, and all of a sudden this big dump of money came into my life. The flow just opened up in a larger than expected way. Instead of me saying, wow, yay, this is great, I'm so excited, thank you, God, I went into this state of feeling, almost depressed. I felt very burdened by it. I got in touch with my tendencies to act in a very enabling way with anybody in my life who needed money for anything. I felt that I had to give it. I felt separate from my friends because I had more than they did, and I felt guilty. And I remember it just came to a head one night when I realized I was at the grocery store and realized I was having a thought in my head to the effect of, what's the most expensive thing I can get myself for dinner tonight to get rid of some of this money? I caught myself thinking that, and I realized, oh dear, I have a problem. And actually what happened shortly thereafter is a lot of this expanded flow contracted. I just disappeared it as quickly as I appeared it. Not all of it, but just enough that I didn't feel burdened anymore. And then I had to do a lot of work on myself. I had to start to expand my whole sense of deserving and feel that it wasn't a bad thing to have more money than somebody else. I had to be willing to say no instead of I can't afford it if somebody came to me wanting money. And I had to do a lot of personal work so that I didn't need scarcity in my life to protect me from things that felt uncomfortable. Now,
interesting. And keep going.
I can give another example around illness. I knew a woman. I worked with a woman who was recovering from breast cancer, and she was very aware that the illness was one of the most positive things that had ever happened to her. She actually was the daughter of missionary parents and had been pretty much programmed from birth to give and give and give and give and give. And she had a whole community of people who adored her because she was just a lovely person, as you could imagine, and wanted to support her. Nobody knew how. She didn't really receive help very well. But she realized that getting sick was the first time she'd put herself first, that she was giving to herself rather than the world. And I counseled her to take that further by creating a wish list of everything her friends could do for her to help. And we got very specific, from practical help to spiritual help, to emotional help. And then I suggested she give them out to all these people in her life who wanted to support her. And she was willing to do that. That was a stretch, but she was willing to do it. And then I added the extra assignment that she also ask those people if they would be willing to keep giving to her from this list. In other words, people could just pick anything off the list anytime they wanted and just come to her and say, I'm giving this. I suggested she ask them if they would keep doing that even when she was clear of the disease. And that's when she had this horrible hitch of, oh my God, I can't possibly do that. And she realized that in order to feel deserving and worthy of that kind of loving attention, she really had to be struggling with life and death. So when we find those hitches that are really outside of our past conditioning and comfort zone, that's often the growth step we need to take to not need the condition, whatever it is, whether it's the relationship pattern or the financial pattern or the health issue.
And it's interesting, you're talking about these patterns. Are these patterns something that we can see for ourselves? Do you find that it's easier to maybe talk to someone like yourself or even myself about what's going on so that they can make you more aware of these patterns that we just keep replaying over and over again?
Well, I actually in my book have a long set of questions that people can walk themselves through to start to identify some of these hidden agendas. I do think it can be easier and helpful to do this with another person, and it really doesn't even need to be a therapist. It can be your good friend who knows you. Some of this stuff, I think of it, if you were to just put your flattened palm right on the palm, the end of your nose, kind of stick it right there and see what you see. It looks like a big blob. It's really hard to tell that it's a palm, it's a hand. But, anybody else in the room could tell you exactly what that is. So sometimes this buried material is just very obvious to someone else, even though it's just, like an invisible hand stuck to the end of our nose to us.
Well, that's because we're living with it 24/7.
That's right. That's right. We're tripping over it all the time, but we can't see it.
So one of the things that you talk a lot about in the book is making miracles, manifesting things. And many people believe that if they desire a new car or a house or a relationship, that if they think about it hard enough or if they pray about it hard enough, they should get it. And then when they don't get it, they think that the process is somehow flawed. What do you say to people when you get, because I'm sure you get that kind of feedback.
Yeah. I think that a lot of the teachings that came out in the early law of attraction work gave the impression that if we just focus on something hard enough, we'll get it. And, there's actually some interesting science around this. There's a very well-known research team of Robert John and Brenda Dunn who are very well known for decades of work of studying the effects of mind controlling matter. And they've just proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that mental intention alone can move matter, can really affect the physical plane. But they've also discovered a very significant proportion of people can cause events to move in the opposite direction of their intent. The opposite. And what I believe this is about, I call it the contrary response. And it's when we focus too hard on making something happen, we actually plug into an unconscious level. It's all full of our doubts and our performance fears and our mental self-talk that says, oh, this works for other people but not for me. And it then starts to repel the object of our desire. When we're in a state of, oh, wouldn't that be lovely, we're in a place of love. Now, the minute that, oh, wouldn't it be lovely, turns into, uh-oh, what if I don't get it? We've shifted from love to fearful attachment. Love is magnetic to our intentions and our highest good. Fear repels it. So a lot of this manifesting work is this really paradoxical fine line of, on one hand, really embracing our desires and allowing them, letting that be the beginning of a directive, but then letting them go and really giving them up to God, in a sense, so that we're not trying to micromanage the results. And that's a lot of what I think of as the difference between manifesting and miracle making, is that miracle making is not about just focusing on overlaying our own personality's agenda on the world. We may start with a desire, because often our inner guidance speaks to us through those gut feelings and those little nudges and the desires that just come up very spontaneously. But that might just be what starts us on a path, and the outcome might be totally different than what we are envisioning. It might be something much better. But when we get too focused, get too attached, then we really don't let God into the process.
I feel a lot of people really get stuck in I don't know if there's, more official terms for this, but more in their mental desires versus their heart's desires. They say, well, I want a new relationship, and so they do all the work around that. But many times when I get those questions from a client, there's either a lot of work they need to do on themselves before they're even open enough to be in a place to have a relationship. I mean, I'm not even talking about those people, but there's also a significant chunk of them that really don't even want the relationship in the first place, even though in their mind they think, well, this is what I want.
Well, and that's what I was referring to as some of the hidden agendas that keep us stuck. Because we all tend to have a lot of conscious intentions and unconscious agendas. And when they're in conflict, then no amount of forward movement is going to take us there. And when we start to unearth maybe the part of us that doesn't want the relationship, or really isn't quite ready to get well, or doesn't want the prosperity we tell ourselves we want, then we have a lot more power to shift. Sometimes just bringing light to some of those unconscious agendas is all it takes to dissipate them. In my own work, I find it's very helpful to bring in even an added dimension. And this is some of what I'm most excited about in relation to my book, Making Miracles. Because on one hand, it is a great manual for manifesting heart's desires and seeing miracles happen. And some people have even used it as a spiritual practice, relating it to A Course in Miracles a little bit. But for me, what's really exciting about it is that it's a big experiment in tapping the collective power of all of us together, and in having an experience of life truly outside of the limiting constructs of cause and effect and even linear time. Because from the very first chapter, readers are invited to become a virtual community, reaching out to one another in love, to join outside of time and space, to support the highest good of everyone. And the whole book then is set up as a group experiment, drawing readers more and more deeply into this big miracle experiment of loving each other. And this unconditional love actually becomes a way to generate energy for manifesting increasingly significant results. And I think that there's something about tapping the power we have together that's really crucial to human evolution right now. I think we're seeing it in a lot of different ways globally and manifesting all over the place. But when we start to, instead of just sitting down and focusing on, well, what are my heart's desires and how can I get them, but seeing this path to personal fulfillment being through joining in love and actually getting excited about the highest good of everyone, it really teaches us through the experience of our own miracles that we can have more for ourselves and create it more easily when we can just lose ourselves, even if it's just for an instant, to this joy of truly caring about the well-being of other people. And this is actually at the heart of something I call the new metaphysics, that we are so much more powerful together, that we have a power collectively that we can't access alone. And this is actually one of the ways that I see a lot of popular teachings have gone a bit out of date. And of course, this is a trend we're seeing everywhere. We're seeing it in all the political movements and Occupy movements all over the place. You know, just this year, Time Magazine declared the protester their Person of the Year. I think we're seeing that people are coming together in unprecedented ways and finding power. And I think we can do that metaphysically, too, without needing the vehicle of technology as an intermediary. So that's one of the things that I aimed to do with this book. And as I said, it is a big experiment. I'm curious to see what's going to come of it. I've really enjoyed all the miracle stories I've had people share with me of things healing and things showing up in all kinds of great ways. But what I find even more interesting is how many people report to me that as they've been working with the book, that they're feeling less alone in the world, that they're feeling more connected and more compassionate and more loved by all these unseen helpers.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a very interesting concept, and I agree with you that no one has really followed, I'm going to say, the flow of energy. You know, they just say, well, you know, saying your intentions to God, or, you know, let go, let God, you know, but there's this idea of letting go. And correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like what you're saying is that this energy actually kind of goes into the collective conscious, and it's like a joint effort in actually making it manifest.
Exactly. That Rupert Sheldrake coined the term morphic field to relate to energy fields of, it could be related to species, but it could also be of human systems of thought. So in other words, something we practice over and over and over again starts to take on its own morphic field. Now, as thousands of people hold an intention that they are going to be present in love for one another and support one another in manifesting not just their own but each other's highest good and heart's desires, that sets up its own morphic field. And I've set up a lot of experiments in the book that, you know, sound kind of outlandish, that we can even step outside of time and join this way, but all of these experiments just are new applications for things that science has already proven or strongly suggested are possible. So we see from the scientific world that time really is illusionary. Time as a line doesn't exist, and intention can transcend time. We can actually send intention back to the past and change things. So what's to stop us from joining intentionally from a place of loving consciousness with everyone in the past, everyone in the present, and even untold numbers of people from the future who are ever going to be part of this miracle experiment? That's a lot of energy there. And I've seen this in group work over the last 40 years, because that's all I've done within my career is lead groups of one sort or another, I've seen this amplifying effect happen again and again, that healing happens more quickly in groups. It's easier to meditate in groups. Personal growth happens. Manifestation happens. We just add to each other in a way that's exponential. And if you can amplify that by just thousands and thousands of people, not even in one space at one time, but across space, across time, it opens up vast new possibilities. And that's a new dimension that I see is coming. I mean, I'm certainly starting it with this book, this little book, Making Miracles, but I think this is part of the wave that we're all going to be catching.
To make this happen, does there need to be, and I'm going to say a conscious connection? You were talking about meditating in groups or working in a group to create an energy or a synergy, which obviously there's some kind of an agreement of the group to do this, and so does there need to be some kind of conscious connection? And I'll just give a different example. I know Lynn McTaggart has been doing a lot of work, getting groups of people, all over the world just connecting by internet that at 3 o'clock on this day we're going to meditate on this, whatever this is, and then they record the results of what transpires after this identified point in time. So there is a conscious connection. For what you're talking about, is there a need to have this connection, or is it really us working on as an individual, sending it out to the ethers and then connecting out there with the other like-minded people?
Well, this whole field is so new and experimental that I don't know that there's anyone on the planet who can speak with absolute certainty to that question.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair answer. I appreciate that.
On one hand, we've seen that there have been all kinds of studies with prayer showing that people who are being prayed for have a result, even if they don't know they're being prayed for, even if they don't believe in prayer, that there has been a measurable result when people receive prayer. So we know that an effect can manifest through this intention on one side, even if the other side isn't registering it. Now, I think that the more conscious and intentional we become with this work, the more finely tuned it becomes. So the experiment I'm putting out is just imagine that everyone in this miracle experiment now is joined together in loving compassion and sending each other the certainty that miracles are unfolding in everybody's life. For example, that's just the tiniest little example of a miracle experiment. So as people in the past, the present, even the future encounter that thought, each person can hold that intention for the whole group. And because time doesn't really exist and space isn't a barrier to intention, conceivably there's no reason why we can't all be together as an amplifying force. And then each of us can take from that force and direct it toward our own highest good as we add to each other's. I think there's a lot of ways that this kind of energy can be played with, and I think the limits are only those of our imagination.
I'll agree. And I like what you're saying. The image that comes to my mind is, if I'm in this place, I am going to attract or be attracted to people that are vibrating at the same or similar energy, and, we will come in communion even though it's not on a conscious level, which Absolutely. I think happens all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's part of the miracle factor. We just start vibrating in a way that we are just attracting to ourselves everything that supports our highest good. We don't have to be trying so hard anymore. And as I was talking before about in working with manifesting, that energy of, oh, wouldn't it be lovely, is love, and it's expansive and magnetic to our good. And as soon as we get into, but what if I don't get it, we go into fear, and then we're repelling our good. If we can instead go into, wouldn't it be lovely, and then shift that into the even bigger energy, and wouldn't it be lovely if we all had our heart's desires and highest good? We break that cycle of, I want what I want it now I'm attached. We just break it. We stay in that state of expansive love. And also every time we hold that intent for another, it is a prayer that we're setting in motion on behalf of someone else, and we know that has effect. So it's interesting. It's hard to chart this kind of stuff in any kind of accurate way, but I've had intuitive people do this work and say, I just had this feeling that I was reaching out to someone in particular and helping them to heal an injury. Or I had someone say, I just felt that I was with a young pregnant woman who was very scared and felt very alone, and just giving her comfort and reassurance. So who knows what impact we're having when we do that kind of work. It could be far bigger than we'll ever really be able to chart or know.
Interesting. So I want to shift here, and this isn't in your book, but I don't know about you. I mean, we have conversations, at our house about law of attraction and what we're attracting currently in our society. And, one of the topics of conversation, actually it comes up in the chat room quite a bit, is the whole idea of 2012 and what are we creating, are we creating our own answer? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I have to preface this with a confession that, I really hadn't paid much attention to all the buzz around the shift of 2012. Because I tend to glaze over a little bit when there's a lot of hype around a specific date. I never truly know. The question always arises, well, how much of this is self-generated through all this intent and buzz,
and that's the
how
reason
much
why
is
I'm
really
asking
about
the question.
the date. But, all of a sudden, I have to say, I am noticing a big shift, and not just in subjective realms of consciousness and energy, but really in the way people are behaving. I think a shift has occurred, and that it has everything with humanity discovering its collective power. And I've touched on that a bit, that we're seeing all kinds of grassroots political movements rising up very spontaneously all over the world. And, access to the masses is happening from the grassroots level up, rather than through established channels. We're seeing careers being made now by going directly to things like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and crowdfunding sites instead of only through the established large moneyed industries. Technology, I think, has evolved to a place where it's now starting to evolve us. It's enabling the emergence of a human hive mind that's conceivably more intelligent than individual minds working separately. And what I think is so interesting is that MIT, in the last few years, has started a whole center for collective intelligence to study just these sort of things. We're also seeing a lot of old assumptions that place competition and survival of the fittest at the heart of evolution, being replaced by new, very science-based theories of cooperation and connection and community as being the more accurate evolutionary story. And I think that this is coming out through a lot of scientific research, but it's really going mainstream through best-selling authors like biologist Bruce Lipton, who wrote a fabulous book, The Biology of Belief, and Lynn McTaggart, who you've mentioned, is writing all kinds of far-edge science that read like metaphysics, and even a lot of popular cable TV science shows are taking a lot of the findings of science that are really changing our story and making them mainstream. So no longer is humanity and human nature about survival of the fittest. We're rewriting that story as being about the power of cooperation. And personally, I think that these technologies are actually teaching us a new way of loving, where things, at a time when the world is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's so much more opportunity to feel anonymous and alienated, we have these very personal technologies like YouTube and Facebook that are putting a very personal face on people we would never, ever have an opportunity to contact, I mean, just a handful of years ago. And I think it's teaching us how to love in a way that encompasses the collective, yet doesn't get detached, that they can still be personal and heartfelt. So that's what I'm seeing as the shift being about. I think it's all about the power of the collective. And I think examples of it are everywhere we look. There's so many I can't even go through them all here.
There has just, because there is so much, and I'm going to say, in the media in particular, and I don't ascribe to the 2012 date, and it's not to me about the date, it's about, that collective consciousness putting such a negative spin, because this is what the media is putting out, that, we're going to blow up, the world's going to blow up, whatever, that it concerns me personally that we're not energetically creating a negative miracle, this is what we want to happen, which is kind of scary.
Well, I think the good news is that, and I think there's science to this too, that love is actually a much more potent emotion than fear. So, a little bit of love cancels out a whole lot of fear. And I think we're at such interesting times now where I think that it is the end of, the world as we know it, and we can create that in a way that has a lot of suffering involved, or we can create that in a way that's a lot more joyful. And I think that each individual has in their own hands the path that is going to unfold for them. That we each have that power nowadays to create life as being this joyful emergence into a new reality, or this collapse of everything we hold dear. So summing that up, it's all in what we ally ourselves with. Are we going to get behind the beginning of something new and wonderful? Are we going to hold on in fearful attachment to everything that's falling apart because it's done now?
And it's a fine line that you really have to choose and look at, and I'll just share my experience. It's like I find that the fear energy, there's so much fear energy around that sometimes you have to stop and go, wait a minute, this isn't even my energy, so why am I here? And once you have that awareness that it's not you, then you can move out of it and go back to your normal place. But, even for people like me who tends to vibrate pretty high, it's like I find myself in the middle of it freaking out.
Yeah. And sometimes, I don't think we need to dispel all that fear because, again, sometimes we get focused on getting rid of something, we just stay in relationship with it. If we can just step back and see it as this part of any change process that it's going to be scary. You know, any time we step beyond where we've been before, even in the direction we want to go, we get to eventually the end of our comfort zone, the end of what's familiar. And we have to step beyond that or we'll never get to anything new. And yet I think each of us has living within us some primal, little, young, kicking, screaming, instinctive part of us that equates change with danger. And you know, that step out of the familiar is just going to be scary. And I think the more we can just see all the fearfulness and step back from it, we don't have to make it go away. We can just step back and say, you know, this is such a normal part of the big change we're in. I accept and bless it all and let it go. And move on. You know, sometimes just normalizing it and diffusing some of the power of it is easier than trying to make it go away.
Hear, hear. Let me shift our focus here again. You know, one of the things you state in your book, and I kind of mentioned this in the beginning, is cultivating a miracle mind. So what can we do to cultivate a miracle mind?
Love. I know that just sounds so simplistic. And you know, there are a million ways to do that. Just, I think, stopping from time to time and being grateful. Stopping from time to time and just taking a breath and looking around and seeing the blessings that exist. Just taking a moment to pull yourself out of your own miseries to reach out a hand to someone else. Just reaching out and calling a friend, saying, hi, I love you. Anything that just shifts our attention for an instant into love is taking us into a miracle mind. And you know, it sounds too simple, yet these simple things are sometimes the hardest things. And that's why I think there are 1,000,001 techniques and self-help books out there, because just making that one little step from fearfulness to love, it can be the hardest step of all. You know, I had a friend who told me of a little prayer she used that changed her life. And I've passed it on to people and said, try this. And they have, and it changed their life. And she's a very sophisticated practitioner of just every technique known to humankind. She's a life coach. She's done every training. She's read every book. And she said to me that when she goes into depression, she knows all the techniques, but she doesn't have the will to use them. But this one little prayer came along that was simple enough that she said she had the motivation to use it. And the prayer is, I love and bless you. And she started by doing that silently to everyone she worked with, because work was a nightmare in her life and causing a lot of distress. I mean, it's a long story, but short story, miracles happened. The workplace got better and better and better. It led to a better and better job. She started having money in the bank. She started being happy. She, let go of depression. Everything just started coming together with that tiny little prayer, and it started within a couple of days. And I've passed this on to any number of different people who've told me the same story, that things that they thought were just immovable and just too terrible to ever change just started shifting. So it can be that simple. I love and bless you. Try it, everybody. See what happens. Let me know your stories. Love to hear.
Well, and I think it's interesting because, one, it makes you acknowledge yourself, which helps to bring you back to center. It's like, oh, yeah, because so many times our energy is so far from our body and so far from our consciousness that even just recognizing ourselves as being part of the process helps us get back into our bodies and be present, and then acknowledging that acknowledging that dynamic between you and, an individual situation, outside of you, I like it.
Yeah, so easy. and when you think about it, I like what you said. It really, it's empowering, number one, to think that I have that power to love and bless someone else. And it really focuses on loving relationship, which, getting back to what I was talking about earlier, it taps into that amplifying power of loving together. And unconditional love, when it's given, it's always received, whether we have any conscious indication of that or not from the other party. And it's such a different approach, that I love and bless you, than simply focusing on our own goals. The old school might be to affirm, I now have the perfect workplace. It's so different to just shine love to the world around us, instead of simply focusing on changing our small experience in it. We become miracle makers, really having an impact to the world around us. And that really is the big difference between miracle making and what I think of as more traditional manifesting techniques.
Because you're part of the process?
Well, because we really see that it's about taking the world with us. That no one can really go forward if anybody is left behind. And as we take the world with us, it's the most self-serving thing we can do. We go further than we would ever have imagined. It really disappears the whole illusion that giving to myself and giving to someone else are two different things.
There are so many people. I'm looking at the clock. We have just about 2 minutes to wrap everything up here, that believe, but I think this is an important point, that it's important to take care of everybody else, but not important to take care of ourselves. And it kind of sounds like, and this is something I believe, in what you said, that part of the whole process is really about taking care of ourselves too, and recognizing our part in this whole universe, in this reality.
Yeah, and what I'm suggesting in miracle making is that we don't do one or the other, that one isn't better than the other, that there really is no duality. And, of course, in miracles, we all know the axiom, it's better to give than receive. A lot of us grew up with that. And, of course, in miracles evolves that into giving and receiving are the same, but that's a really hard one to grasp. I think that putting it into practice, what I aim to do with my book and, what I'm now calling the new metaphysics, is put that into really practical applications so that we see through the demonstration of our own miracles that loving other people and caring about other people is the most selfish, self-serving thing we can do. It's efficient. It's not just good.
Cool. No, we don't even have time for that. I was going to ask if you had any last words that you want to wrap up with, but I need to just go here. If somebody wanted a copy of your book, Making Miracles, Creating New Realities for Your Life and Our World, where would they go to find one?
Well, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it in a lot of bookstores. If you don't see it at your bookstore, I always suggest people go and ask for it at the bookstore, because bookstores need our business these days. They're in kind of a sad place. Frequent the bookstore you love the most.
Lynn, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was wonderful having you.
It was great. Thank you so much.
And, good luck on your book. And I'm hoping that it's making miracles for you.
Oh, it is.
I just always love talking about this, because I think being reminded that we can have the life that we love and that we want is just so important, to just have that little reminder.
Yeah.
So, anyway, okay, well, The music's going to be coming up in a second. Thank you again for coming on, and have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, you too. It was great. Take care.
There it goes. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Lynn. That was Lynn Woodland. Her website is lynnwoodland.com. Her book, Making Miracles, Create New Realities for Your Life and Your World. Next week, we have two phenomenal guests. In the first hour, we have Nancy Red Star talking about the wisdom of our star ancestors. And in the second hour, we have Lynn Andrews coming on talking about ancient teachings for a modern world. So until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise